Are you ready to become the balanced leader you are destined to become? Then stay right here. Welcome to today's Balanced Leader, where we empower today's leader to be the best that you can be, both in your professional and personal life. I'm your host, Caroline Baird, and I've explored and believe the intersection of wellness and leadership are key to finding the balance you are craving as a leader. This is the show where we focus on leadership and the importance of maintaining balance in today's fast-paced and constantly changing world. We talk about topics related to leadership, from communication and team building to personal development and finding balance during challenging times. We will also hear from inspiring guests who have achieved success in their fields and have valuable insights to share about their leadership journeys and on what it takes to be a successful leader. But this podcast isn't just about leadership, it's also about wellness too. Taking care of your mind, body, and spirit is essential to becoming a successful leader, and you'll get tips and strategies for living a healthy, balanced life, from managing burnout and improving mental health, to finding ways to reset and reground during a typical day at work so that you can achieve your goals. So whether you're a CEO, an entrepreneur, or just someone looking to improve your leadership skills, this podcast is for you. Are you ready? Well, let's get going. Welcome back, listeners. I'm so excited to have you here today on today's Balanced Leader. I'm so excited to have our guest speaker today, Simona Costantini. She is the founder and CEO of Costantini Productions, which is a full-service production podcast agency. And it produces more than 25 podcasts on a weekly basis, with more than half in the top 30 to 100 podcasts in their niche markets. So whether it's speaking on a stage, training a team, or doing a guest interview on a podcast, Simona is known for providing her audience with high-touch information that leaves attendees and listeners with actionable insights and next steps, and blows their mind as it's packed with value. She leaves no secrets unshared. She is the executive producer and host of two podcasts herself, one being Happiness Happens and another called As It Relates to Podcasting. She helps women entrepreneurs in the parenting, wellness, and marketing spaces, bringing their personality, brand, and passion to the mic by helping them launch, manage, and grow their podcasts. Her mission is simple: to help creators feel valued, seen, and empowered to bring their voice to the mic and make an impact with their message. Her experience spans more than 10 years in marketing communications, advertising, and public relations, all of which tie into her business, client work, and speaking engagements. When Simona isn't behind the mic producing a show or strategizing a game-changing podcast launch, you can find her at home in wine country with her cockapoo dog named Gus. Simona, I'm so excited to have you join me here today. And I'm so excited because you're the reason that today's Balanced Leader is actually here. So thank you. And I'm glad we were able to find time to have you here as a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And I mean, maybe I guided you through the process, but you did a lot of the work. So more of that accountability piece than anything else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So today, Simona is going to talk to us about energetics. And energetics means so many things to so many people, but it really does tie to leadership. And I'd love to have you share with our listeners today and making them better leaders and yet taking care of their wellness at the same time.
I love that. It's such a open-ended question and not in a bad way, just because you're right. Everyone looks at energetics differently. And I think that one of the key things that makes people an exceptional leader is the ability to understand your own energy and where your energy is going, how much you have left in the tank, and then also how much you can put out to other people so that you're not hitting that burnout spot, so that you're not overdoing it, and so that you're not over promising and under delivering. I think it's really important to acknowledge and be aware of where our energy is at and what is filling our cup, what is not, what is adding to our energy and what is draining it. That's usually a sign if you're doing the right things, quote unquote, or things that maybe you shouldn't be doing, you know?
Right. And so when would you say you started really bringing energetics into your business? And maybe you can talk a little bit about the impact that it had for our listeners to understand how it really helped you to launch your business.
That's a really great question. Really great question. So I think I know that for myself, it was the energetics came first before the business actually did. It was back in 2018 when I first sort of had I don't guess your first like dark night of the soul type of moment. And I was just kind of like, I'm so unhappy. Like I'm so miserable. I don't really like a whole lot about my life or like who I am or anything like that. And then it sparked a deep dive into the world of personal development. I went to go see my therapist for the first time. I started learning about what life coaching was for the first time and all of these different pieces. And then what I started realizing in the process was, I was starting to undo all of these stories and like narratives that I believed, but were not necessarily for me to believe. And I ended up launching my Happiness Happens podcast. And then through the Happiness Happens podcast, had so many amazing conversations, met so many incredible people, and got to learn a lot about, neuro-linguistic programming and hypnotherapy, Reiki, energy healing, metaphysical energy healing, all of these different modalities. And it starts to expand your awareness. And so when I decided to start my production company, even when I was still freelancing and when I was a life coach myself. So it was like I was a life coach and I did freelancing production work and then I went into podcast production. And, you know, even from that moment, like all the way at the beginning, I always had this understanding of like, knowing where people's energies were at. And that helped me be able to learn from them and grow from them and understand them deeper,
Mhm.
which adds to who you are as a leader because you need to be able to recognize when your team is stressed out, when
Right.
your contractors are overworked, when things are not getting done and handed in on time, or when your own self can't show up, you know?
Right.
So I started pulling all these pieces together that really made me realize, the importance of embracing the energy that you're in and how do you have open and honest communication with the people who are in your circle, like who are in your team, so that they can understand too? So it was a whole mix of a whole bunch of things, but I really don't think that leadership, that business, and that running a business can happen without having awareness in what your energy is like?
Yes, absolutely agree. And in our last podcast interview, we talked a little bit about leadership being like self-leadership as well. So whether you're a leader of a team or a leader of yourself, you are so right. I feel like the energetics really makes an impact on your effectiveness.
Mm,
And if you're a leader and your ability to lead as a team and manage your team, because if you're in a negative energy space, it's not going to work and you're going to burn out quicker than if
mm,
you tap into that energetics that is so positive and then in turn helps you to set your day, strategize, and look at the big picture as opposed to being caught in the weeds with the tasks that have
mhm.
to be done. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, for yourself as a leader, because you led a team for a lot of years, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't say it like that, but I'm just saying, like, you led big teams and teams that were across the country and teams that were not physically present with you all the time, which, like, I can relate to a little bit, not on the same scale, but like my team is not physically present with me. We don't sit in an
Right.
office all day long. But
Right.
you also dove into more of the energetic work, I would
Yes.
say. I mean, more so a few years ago. How did it change the way that you started leading?
I think the exact thing is I started to see the ability to balance things, to understand. I felt I was more in tune and present when I was speaking with somebody. So as opposed to I've got this to accomplish, especially if I was traveling, right? I'm only there once or twice a year. I've got this to accomplish, but I
Yep.
can't just be there to check the box because that's not going to help anybody, right? So there are elements where you have to check the box, but then aside from that, I think through energetics, I was able to take the time to be present with individuals and truly listen to
Mm.
what some of their pain points were, celebrate with them if they had a work anniversary or had a child and just came back from maternity leave, or, depending on what that was. And then yet at the same time, be able to take some of those ideas away and hopefully help people so that they too would be in better space. Because when you remove something that is a pain point for somebody, it's amazing what it can do in turn for them to
Yeah.
be productive, effective, and just be happy at work. So,
Oh,
right?
that's so good.
Yeah.
It's so true. That's so
Yeah.
good. I love
Yeah.
that.
So, talk to me a little bit around what do you think some of the concepts are, Simona, of energetic intelligence and how
Hmm.
people can truly leverage it to their leadership as a leader. And I'm all about examples as well, because we can talk about a number of things. And then people are like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. If I had time, I would do that. But
Yeah,
sometimes this doesn't take, it's not like this is going to take a half a day for you to be able to do. Maybe you can share a little bit about some of the concepts that you've brought into your world and into your life, whether they work or not, because it's not going to work for everybody, right? You've always got to
totally.
find the right thing.
Totally. The right balance. Not to play on the word of the podcast, but I love it. What you just called it is such a cool term to me. Actually, I was like, hold on here. I was like, that is really cool. I really like that. I think it goes back down to who you are as a human being and like what fills your cup in that type of way. I think that it's really important to take time for yourself. Like I think you really do need to take time to like take a step back, and I find that for myself, okay, for myself, it's going to be very simple things that most people probably already do. But for me, they're big things because they don't happen all the time. So for me, one big one is getting 7 hours of sleep. Like
Mhm.
I usually get like 5 because I like to work late. I like to work late at night. I'm more creative at night, but then you kind of find that that doesn't actually work in the long term, and your creative brain isn't able to be creative when you're not sleeping enough. And then also your patience level as a leader goes down. You know what I mean? Because you're just like, "Oh my God, like how?"
Yeah,
And then with clients too, you know what I mean? Like it can also be like, oh my goodness, like, but, and then it's about how do you find that balance to not just, go off on a tangent that maybe you don't want to be on type of thing.
right.
So yeah, so that's definitely one way. And then another way is I really like to walk. So for me, walking is like a form of therapy for me. Like it's a way that I get back in alignment. It's a way that I get my best downloads, my most creative juices start flowing when I'm walking. It can be
Yes.
walking outside in nature, or it can also be walking inside of my house. Like I have a walking pad that I put underneath my desk. And so anytime I'm feeling like, the energy is chaotic, every time I'm feeling like I'm being chaotic, or that I'm not in alignment, or that I'm getting distracted or whatever, I just take the walking pad and I put it under my desk and I start walking. And then within probably 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay, like everything is fine. You know what I mean? This is fine. And we're going to work through the list and everything's going to be great. And it helps me like recenter and get back on track. And then another one, I like to do like sleep meditations. I have a hard time like sitting and doing a meditation in the morning and all that kind of stuff, but I like to fall asleep to them and have that sort of like reset my nervous system. Hopefully, I think at least I think that's what it's doing. And
Yes.
then, some people like to journal, and I will on occasion, but I really have to be in like the right season to be
Yes.
able to do that. Like it's not something that I do all the time, but I do like to talk. And so sometimes I'll go, record an episode for my podcast, my Happiness Happens podcast, about something that I've learned or something I'm going through, something that I'm experiencing, and giving people the lesson that I've learned through that. That for me is a way to sort of get back into alignment and keep the vibe higher, because I'm like talking and processing things outwards helps me raise the vibration back up again. So a couple expected ones and a couple unexpected, I guess.
I love that. And it's funny. I didn't realize you and I talk a lot, but I didn't realize how aligned we were with that, because I'm the same thing. I have to be in the right season to journal.
Mm,
So, I do meditation. It's one of the things that's been critical for me in many of the changes or transformations that I've gone through my life. Meditation is definitely one of them.
mm.
But journaling, what I've started to do now is sometimes at the end of the day, I'll just take my phone and I'll take my audio and actually record instead of writing out a journal. So
Oh,
So you can record yourself with certain things. And then obviously there's programs where they can put it out in text for you,
yeah.
etc. It's a great way to use it for future podcasts and things that you want to do, whether it's a program or something like that. But
Yeah.
what I loved about it was quick and easy, and you can do it at any point in time. Not that I'm going to tell people to do it while they're driving, but you can do it while you're driving. You
It's
could
funny.
do it for a minute in between. You could do it while you're walking, right? When you
Mhm.
talk about doing your walk, because that's the perfect time that your brain becomes very creative.
Mhm.
And it's funny how just the world shuts off and this creativity comes in. So
Mm.
I learned really quickly to start recording that because there were
That's
some good nuggets in there.
That is so smart. And oftentimes I feel like, okay, so I'm also like most creative and I would say like most aligned when I'm driving, like far distances or when I'm walking. And like you don't have a piece of paper, you know what I mean? And like sometimes you have the thought in your mind and it's like, oh my God, I gotta stop, I gotta type or whatever. But when my sister was getting married, I didn't know what to write for my speech for her. So I was like, oh, let me just go for a drive. So I went for a drive. I started driving. I started thinking, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. I wrote her entire speech by talking first and then transcribing it afterwards.
Love it.
It was so much easier. It was
Yes.
so much easier. And it was like so much more heartfelt because it's exactly the words that I would have wanted to say. And
Right.
it kind of goes back down to like that the other side I'm thinking about this too is, you know, if you are a leader of a team and there are things that are frustrating to you about your team, instead of like writing it out and sending it, and instead of potentially writing out an email and accidentally hitting send, totally something you can just talk about. And like instead of calling up a friend and like venting, it could just be something you just do for yourself. And then you don't have like the backlash of feeling like, a gossipy person or this or that. You know what I mean? Like you just do it for yourself.
Yep.
You let it go.
Yes.
Because I think that one thing that I've noticed, I noticed this from my years of working in corporate, people love to talk about each other,
Yes.
and it's
That
such a
water cooler
low
chat.
vibe. Yeah, it's such a
Yes.
low vibe way to live.
Yes.
And if you want to be an exceptional leader, I don't think that sitting and talking badly about the people who help you do your job every day is an effective way to get your point across at all.
Yes. I've also said it doesn't resolve it doesn't resolve anything and you don't find any solutions
Yeah.
because generally you're speaking with people that don't make and I hate saying don't make the decisions, but aren't the ones that have cascaded this information
Yeah.
where if you talk to the appropriate people, you may understand the why, or
Mm.
you may bring something to their attention that they weren't necessarily thinking about. And so yeah, I agree with you. That water cooler is something that it just makes you feel yucky at the end of the day, right?
It really
When you do
does. It
that.
really does. Where
Yeah,
you put your time and where you put your energy is so important to like the output and the impact that you have. So whether it is that you're leading a team or you're just leading yourself,
right,
what is that internal noise? What is that internal conversation? And how is that either raising or lowering your energy and vibe around you?
right.
You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the other strategies I did, because I'm going to ask you about strategies, is when I was in my office, and not everybody has an office, but they can find spaces to go, lunchroom, meeting rooms, bathroom.
Yeah.
There's places you can go. People always used to say, well, I do meditation or I do breath work, but it's, half an hour long. You don't have to do it for half an hour,
Mm-mm.
right? You can do something really short and sweet. And a lot of times, what I used to do in between meetings, just to get refocused, and even when I was visiting, when I was out in the field, before I get out of my car, I'd stop, I'd take a couple of deep breaths after focusing on something in nature.
Mm.
Take deep, deep breaths that go right into your belly. And it's amazing when you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and you do that 3 times, how you've just reset yourself.
Yeah.
And now you're focused and you've you've allowed yourself to put that aside, even if it's just temporarily, so that you can truly be present for the next visit that you're doing, which at the end of the day is who we are and
Mm.
represents who we are as leaders, right? Our last conversation with Kelly was about leadership and legacy. When you talk about legacy, as a leader, you want people to remember you fondly and the great things that you did for them. And what a great way to teach people about energetics, to
Yeah.
be able to get through a tough day because we're all going to have them, guaranteed.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
But
what strategies do you think leaders or people in general could employ to really address? or resolve conflicts sometimes that they have with different people on their teams,
Mm,
from a strategic dynamic? Is there anything that you can think of that you would use to help individuals work through that and get rid of that
100%.
water cooler chuck?
Oh my God, 100%. So the first thing that I would say is, and this is just to sort of bounce off what you were just talking about, it is so important before you shift from thing to thing to thing to thing that you take a pause. And those big belly breaths, like you were saying, are really, really important. I also like to do, because I skew more anxious than most people, and my anxiety is a huge driver in in what I do every single day and like how I speak to people, and in a good way, because I'm like so worried that I'm going to offend someone. You know what I mean? So I'm like extra kind, like extra this, extra that. But in any case, I do like box breaths, like, in
Yep.
for, like hold for 4, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And I like doing that a lot because I feel like that is a really great way to pull yourself out of like that anxious space. So I mean, if you have to have a hard conversation with someone on your team, like that is a really good strategy, that even before you have that conversation, you can do that and you can just pause yourself and like recenter yourself. But I also find it's helpful when you're bouncing in between, from thing to thing to thing. Like right before we did this interview today, I had another call right before. And, if I didn't pause and at least take a few breaths, I would have been bringing all of the baggage
Mhm.
that was on that last call into ours today. And that's
Right.
not fair. You know what I mean? And so I encourage people to think about that, I encourage leaders to think about that, because, if you're leading your team, they're going to feel the stresses. And it's not that you have to hide it, because I don't think you need to hide the realities of what's going on, but it helps you reframe how you want to approach it. And
Right.
I think your approach is everything. So making sure so now, in for actual strategies, your approach is so important. How you speak to people is
Mm.
how they're going to be remembered. Are you listening to understand, or are you listening to just hear and respond?
Right.
That is a very different dynamic. And I think what I've noticed in my team, that when I approach a situation, I mean, there's things all the time that, we get frustrated. You get frustrated because you have expectations about, what you thought was going to happen, what the other person thought was going to happen, and everything in between, right?
Right.
When we have moments like that within my agency, I try and let go of what my preconceived idea is about something. And I try and approach things always with compassion and with empathy and understanding,
Mhm.
and to understand and to question and to get curious first, and then to react in a way that is best aligned to that situation afterwards. And so, you know, for example, if one of my team members needs to be out of office for X, Y, and Z reason, maybe their kids need something or whatever. While it can be frustrating because now it's delayed the timeline that I was expecting, it's also an opportunity to practice compassion and understanding and empathy, And so it's not that you're saying that things are okay and that it's okay for things to not get done on time, but what you're saying is, I recognize you're a human being going through a really freaking hard time, and that's okay, and you're allowed. So what's the plan, right?
Yes.
What's the plan? What do we need to do from here? What do I need to do to help? How can we get back aligned again? And how can we continue to evolve and to continue to, do the work that we said was going to happen? What needs to change? What needs to adjust? I think when you approach things with curiosity, and that through that place of empathy, you are able to make more sound decisions, because you're not coming from a place of emotion and being heated and being upset about it. Instead, you're genuinely approaching it out of curiosity, so that you can go and find a plan and a solution for how are you going to do it differently, and how will your team feel on the
Right.
receiving end of that, right? You want to leave people feeling inspired and encouraged and, grateful for being part of the team. Like that, those are qualities I think leaders would always want their team to feel like. No one likes feeling boxed in, like manipulated, micromanaged. Nobody
Not
likes that.
heard. Yeah.
Not heard, right? And so I,
Yeah.
I just really think that when you approach things from curiosity, you can definitely move through things in a very different way.
I love that you brought that forward because really, really early on in my career, I would say that I wasn't great at it. I've
Mm,
always, the reason I got into HR is I've always wanted to help people. But sometimes when you hear the same recurring situation,
yeah.
it can get frustrating, right?
So
So,
frustrating.
especially when you're not the expert in a particular area, somebody else is, but they can't come forward with a solution at all, right? So, it's a little bit frustrating. And so, I think what I used to do was almost make assumptions of what
Yeah.
the problem was and slough it off to some degree.
Yeah.
Where you're right, when you get in that right frame of mind, and you start to ask those questions, sometimes you find out that it isn't what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And they actually have a very, very valid opinion. And in the case of needing time off, you're able to support them better because
Hmm.
you're also teaching individuals to, we always say, don't just come with a problem, come with a solution as well. But if they've never done that, it's hard for them to do. So you want to make sure you're teaching them along the way because we've all had to be taught that as well at some point in our
Exactly.
career, right? So,
Exactly. And I
yeah,
think the biggest difference too, when it comes to leadership and people being able to open up and feeling comfortable to open up, is in your leadership style, right? If
right.
you are someone that people feel safe with and feel comfortable coming to and having a conversation with, you're going to get so much further than, I think back to this boss that I used to have when I worked in corporate. She was a nightmare. You know what I mean? Like she was just a nightmare. And I was
Yeah,
like, I never want to tell you anything because
yeah,
A, I don't trust you. B, I think you're going to go and tell everybody else. And then C, I just don't like you. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
And so like she had every power though within her to be able to change that and never did. You know what I mean? And I think people do the best they can with what they have and the awareness that they have. But it really taught me the type of leader that I don't want to be, you
yes,
know? And one thing that I was thinking when you were speaking as well is this piece, this communication piece is so important. Instead of, like you said, approaching things with an assumption, you approach it with the intention of communicating and getting to a solution. And so, one thing that I tell my team all the time is problems are going to happen every day. Challenges are going to arise all the time. Stuff is going to land on your plate that you didn't even know, like how are you going to navigate this one, and life happens.
right,
Life is always happening. So I think if you can understand as a leader that life is going to happen to your team and you need to be able to understand and like just like cut them some slack and give a little grace. I think that's key. But I always tell my team, I cannot help you and I cannot fix anything and I cannot change anything without you telling me and being honest and being open with communication, which is
right,
hard for people to do because not everyone is used to communicating on that level.
right,
But then I think that leads back into the type of energy that you bring to the table, the awareness that you have within yourself, and then the ability to become more vulnerable, which allows you to tap into different energies and different frequencies, right? So it's this like constant loop. Like when you give someone a permission slip to be vulnerable and to communicate, you're also giving them a permission slip to show up differently in their life overall.
right.
Become
Absolutely.
kind,
Yeah,
more compassionate, more caring. So
yes,
it really has it's a trickle. And then it's
it
also
is.
a loop.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that because, when I think about the times that I've worked with teams and when you lead by example. So, if there's something I need to do, a doctor's appointment, and I need to go during the day because that's all I can get,
Yeah.
you go, but you have to make sure that that communication piece is very upfront because you don't want to be the only one doing it and your team going, oh, look, she can go whenever she wants to go. But yeah, we're
Yeah.
stuck between our working hours.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that communication to build that trust, right? So it's not only that, oh, I have a problem that I'm coming to you with. It's
Yeah.
also the, oh, I'm coming to you with something super exciting, a graduation of a child or something like that, because that's where you build that trust and vulnerability to be able to share
Mm,
and to work through those processes, right? So that the business still has to run at the end of the day, right? But you can
exactly.
find ways to take care of it. Or they may say, listen, I need to take tomorrow off because X, Y, and Z, or my kid's got to go to the doctors, and we saw it a lot through COVID, right? The
Yeah.
minute a child had a sniffle, I got to go
Oh,
home
I
with
gotta
my
go.
kids. Yes.
Exactly.
And that's going to happen, but it's having that compassion that then also allows an individual when they get home to be able to maybe log in and do some work, if that's an opportunity for them to be able to do, as opposed to be frazzled and now very fearful of coming to work the next day and then not being productive. So it's
Exactly.
so important.
It's so important.
Yeah,
Trust is the number one thing, I think, in my opinion. And if you can help your team develop trust in you and then you trust in them, I think you're golden. I think, in my opinion, I mean, I do not work in corporate anymore, but if I were to go back and work in corporate, I think so much has to change. And I think it comes from leadership. Long gone are the days that people want to sit into an office from 9 to 5, 9 to 6, 9 to 7.
right.
Long gone are the days where people are sitting there twiddling their thumbs, watching their life pass them by. You know what I mean? I think it's a challenging place for a leader to be, because it's like, yes, you have to, adhere to all of these specific things that the way it quote unquote used to be, which is the most detrimental thing an organization can say. But, you know, there's so much power in, oh, you don't work well from, 2 till 4. Okay, no problem. Take a break, pick back up. I just think that as long as your work is getting done, I tell my team this all the time. I don't care when you work. As long as I do not care. I could not care less. I don't care when you're online. As long as the tasks are due to me on the day, like as long as I receive the stuff that is due to me on the day and time that it is due, I don't care. I don't care if
Right,
you want to work Saturday. I don't care if you want to work Monday night. You know what I mean?
right.
I don't care if you're not online for 4 days and you want to work an 18-hour day. Go ahead. You know what I mean? But I think that just comes from this place of, you know, being clear as a leader who you are, your own values, what is important to you, which is a direct impact into the energy that you bring to your team, the way you balance your own energy,
Right.
and the confidence you have within yourself as a leader.
Yes.
That trickles down. If I wasn't confident in myself, I would never be able to be confident in my team to deliver this specific thing,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's definitely, and yeah, and I think when you give them that ability to make decisions for themselves, it allows them to be a leader for themselves, to
Yeah.
be able to sit down and really look at it and maybe come to you with questions, but to really, like I said, to be a leader, it doesn't mean that you have to have direct reports.
No.
You can be a leader of yourself and learn a lot of these, these tools or these strategies to be able to become such an effective, but I don't even want to call it strategic leader, but an amazing leader that people want to come to you and work with you, or ask you to be their mentor, or come to your department when there's an opening,
Yeah.
because those are the leaders that you truly are going to learn from. And so I always say to people, my door is always open. And if it's closed, I've got an email,
Yeah,
I've got a
exactly.
phone, I've got, right? There's ways to get in touch. But I think it's so important to be able to allow your team to make those decisions for themselves. To now, there's some where you can't, there's shift work and things like that.
Sure.
It
Of
doesn't
course.
allow you to do
Of
that.
course.
But same thing where they're starting to become ways to support associates or an employee through different ways as a business. And that's, I'm starting to see that shift in companies. So
Which is
it's great.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's really
It's so
great.
long needed.
Agree with you completely.
Yeah, we could have another podcast on that.
Right? Sign me up for that one. I got a lot to say about corporate. And I'm just kidding.
So what are some of the effective strategies that leaders can use to manage and balance the energy? If you think about your teams, you've got introverts and extroverts. So what do you think you would guide them to say, here's a great way to find that balance of energy between the team members when you've got such a diverse group? And
Hmm.
diversity is phenomenal, but how do you manage that balance?
That's a really good question. I think it's knowing how people work is such a key thing to begin with, and then being able to guide that within your team as well. So there's one healing modality that I love. It's called human design. And I really, really, really like human design because it's based in the placement of the planets when you were
Mhm.
born. So it's a little bit woo woo, but there is an actual science behind it. And so there's a balance there too, which I really like. But within this modality, there are different types of ways of being, if you will. And everyone has a different type. And so I think when you can understand what each team member like which type each team member is,
Mhm.
it will help facilitate conversations in a different way. So I'll give you an example. Like you and I, your type is projector, my type is manifesting generator. We work very differently.
Yes, we very
We're
differently.
if we were on the same team, I know, because I've studied human design and I've read your chart, I know that who I am as a human being can be a lot. I can be overpowering, I can be loud, I can be in your face, and I can be all of the things. But I know that your type works best when people ask you questions, when people give you that invitation to add your thought in or to respond to something. You know what I mean? So it's a cue for me to not be overbearing in the conversation, to not, I mean, I talk a lot, but like to not overpower, you know what I mean? And to make sure that you feel safe to add your thought in.
Right.
And so I think that teams could really benefit from understanding these different types and how different people work. Because if you have, two employees that are in the same dynamic, let's say, you would know that employee one or team member one works this way, team member two works this way. And you can help facilitate, like, as a leader, the ways in which they can communicate together.
Right.
So I don't know, it's a little bit far-fetched, I think, for most leaders to sort of be like, oh, let me go and study this whole thing, whatever. But I think boiling it down even from that is to understand how people operate on a human level, what brings them joy, what doesn't, what type of work they enjoy, what they don't, and staying curious and like asking questions of, do you even like this work? No.
Right.
Okay. What do you want to do instead? And then how do you hire out, X, Y, and Z? And I'm saying this specifically in my agency because I have a lot of flexibility in that way. I realize that, in some corporate jobs, like you have a job description, like you can't just like not do the work, but yeah, that's what I would say. What do you think?
And I like that. And I giggle about human design. It's next on my list of learning that I want to do to be able to share human design. And anybody who knows me that's listening to this podcast knows that in the HR space, we do a lot of MBTI or the Myers-Briggs. We'll do strength finders. We'll do so many different things. So you are finding out about individuals and what their strengths are, what's important to them. And I always say that's so important, is understanding what is important to somebody, how they like to receive feedback, how they like to receive recognition. It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for human design. And what human design actually allowed me to do was understand some of I used to call them idiosyncrasies, because I couldn't understand it, or I'd get frustrated by something by myself. But then when I read it, I kind of went, oh, that makes perfect sense. Because not only do I work best in the morning and I work better in the evening, my downtime is more the afternoon, similar to you a little bit, I think, too.
Yeah.
But I'm not a 5 a.m. person, never have been, never wanted to be, was because of the corporate world.
You had to be.
But I mean, it's funny. I've talked to other people that have since retired, how that has completely changed for them, right? Now they've found that balance that they're looking for to be able to be productive. And I think human design helps you understand yourself more, but to your point, also understand other individuals so that you can share that as a team so that you're stronger together, but also as a leader. Those things are so critical, because you don't want to be recognizing somebody in a group of 100 people where you make them come up stage and they're terrified of it. So understanding what's important to them, but also what's important to them in their job. Why are they working? I always used to joke saying, I could care less about titles, pay me the money, because I'm an individual who likes to travel. And so money was important for me to be able to travel. But there are people that, having a cottage or a pool or something like that is more important to them. So just trying to understand that a little bit more is so just phenomenal as a leader, right? So
it's so true. That's such a good point.
I love that. Thank you. So what other types of energetics have you explored? And I'm just thinking about, I mean, I know we could talk forever on some of these things, but
for sure.
the ones that really resonated with you, we talked a little bit about meditation, we talked about human design, journaling, things like that. Is there anything else that you find is really key for leaders that is and I hate to say quick and easy, but it's more of a quick and easy, because leaders a lot of times don't have time, right? You're literally going from work, going home, making dinner, getting laundry done, whatever it is, if you've got younger kids, getting homework
Yeah.
done, baths, bed. Like, what
Yeah.
would you say if somebody was like, oh, I so want to get into energetics, I need it as a starting point, and maybe a couple of them that you
Yeah,
would
for sure.
recommend?
For sure. So I think that, everyone is busy, right?
Mhm.
You can be busy with a million and five things. If you want to go down this path and really tap into your own energy and all of that, you really do have to make time for it. And I definitely understand and like empathize with the go 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 schedule. I don't have small children, I don't have children at all, but my days are really full,
Right.
and you have to prioritize it. So what I would say is something like a sleep meditation might actually be something that's really good for you. This might be a bit of like a left field one, but doing something to fill your cup. So like if you
Mhm.
do like to get up in the morning and go and work out, I mean, I do, you know what I mean? Like I like to wake up in the morning. My workout class is at 6 a.m., So for me, I wake up, I like to get into my car, I like to listen to my music, I like to drive to my gym, I like to do the workout, and I like to drive home. You know what I mean? That for me is the way that I balance my energy. The music that I listen to
Mhm.
helps balance my energy. The energy that's in the room because the workouts that I do are in a group setting, the energy that's in the room, everyone is excited to be there. Everyone is happy to be there in the morning. It sets the tone for how you spend your time and how you start your day. And
Right.
then like on the flip side of that, I would say things like Reiki. I love Reiki. I don't do it a whole lot, but you can also do distance Reiki, which I know you do for people, which is so easy. You literally lay in your bed and someone is doing distance Reiki on you, which I love. And then I try one thing and this one isn't like overly quick fix, but every quarter or so, or at least twice a year, I try and do a retreat of some kind,
Love
some
that.
kind of like day retreat, whatever that looks like. And if you plan them ahead and in advance, you can you can definitely fit into your schedule, especially if you have kids. Like you just make alternate arrangements, if you plan
Yes.
those kinds of things in advance. So I think that, okay, maybe those aren't quick hits, but also I don't think that, I don't think that energy work is a quick fix. Like there's nothing about energy work, in my opinion, that is fast. I feel like it's kind of like your healing journey in a way. It's like there's always something that can be done more and can be explored even more. So
Yes.
I would say, but if you are looking for those quick hits, I would say a grounding meditation that you're making time for, deep breaths in between your meetings,
Yes.
going for a walk, even if it's around your building. Like one thing I used to do when I worked in corporate, I worked in a building that was like, my God, how many floors? 12 floors or something like that. And every hour I would get up from my desk and I would just run the stairs. I would run all the way down and then I would walk back up. And it was just like a nice little reset. It's no different than going to the bathroom. Like really. You know what I mean? I think at the end of the day,
It's,
probably why I don't
it's,
work in corporate anymore, Caroline.
I'm sitting there going, you're one of those people. I wouldn't
I'm
be
one of those
doing
people.
at 12 floors.
It was the fifth
I'll go
floor
down
down.
12
So like,
floors and take the
and then
elevator
take
up.
the elevator back up. But even that is nice too. Like
That's true.
I think it was like 4 floors at the time when I did it. And my coworker and I, like the girl I worked with the closest, her and I would do it together. So we would look
Yes.
at each other, we'd be like, okay, break. Yep, sounds good. And we would run down the stairs, we would cross the other side of the building, we would come up the other stairs, and then we would come back to our desk. It was such a nice break. I just
Yes.
think really comes down to giving yourself a break so that you can even feel the emotions that you have.
Yes. Yes. And I love that because it's not, it doesn't take long. You
No.
absolutely can step away from your desk. To your point, you go to the bathroom. So make one of them where you're going outside, or you're taking yourself away not only from your specific workspace, but from
Yep.
your office area. Like
Yes.
you need a complete change. If
Yes.
that's going and sitting in your car and cranking up the tunes, or to your point,
Yeah.
I love the walking outside because I think that connection with nature is key.
Yeah. Can I add
And
two more?
yeah, yeah, of course you
So
can.
two things that I found, especially working from home now and like having
Mm.
my own business now, these ones are probably more for like entrepreneurs, but I make sure that, I mean, I have an office and I like to work from my couch sometimes, but that can be like a downward spiral because you just find like you're sitting on the couch all the whole time. But having a dedicated space for your work is really important. And one thing that I love to do, especially in the summertime, I like to take sunshine breaks. And I do this in the wintertime too. So in the summertime, I go and I sit outside, or like I'll lay outside on my deck for like 2.2 seconds, not even, well, okay, maybe like a couple minutes while I'm heating up my lunch before going back to work. You know what I mean? Or I'll go
Love that.
and I'll talk to my garden, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
like just check in on the plants and see how they're doing. In the wintertime, I go and I stand by the back door in the one ray of sunshine that is floating through the window. And I just stand there and I just like kind of absorb the sun for a little bit. And then I just go back along with my day. It's like, it's a really nice little pause. It's a good little balance, you know?
I love that. I love that. And that's, I think we don't do that
Imagine
enough,
being my
right?
neighbors.
She's just standing at the
She's just
door. What is
standing
she
there
doing?
watching me. They're like, why is she standing in the ray of sun? Like, okay, is she going to be okay? We're not sure. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. And there's so many things you could do, right? And we talked a little bit about it. There's things that are going to resonate with you and things that aren't. And to our listeners, I'll say, at the beginning, the healing journey is a lot of work in that you are exploring to find out, one, what works for me, what resonates. Two, what is it I'm trying to even work on? Because there could be so many things that you're working on, and realize that you can pivot. It's not a one size fits all. You may start with something and then transition to something, which is exactly what I did in my journey.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still have people that say to me, I can't meditate. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. You can
You
meditate.
can.
You just
You just don't know
haven't,
how.
yeah, you haven't learned how, and you haven't sat quietly long enough. Everybody can get there.
Yep.
And it's not always a matter of how long, it's how effective it is in that time period, right? Like you can meditate for 2 minutes, you can meditate for 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel better after the 30-minute
Of
one,
course.
but even the 2-minute one, because I do meditations using chakras and things too, is you can focus on all your chakras. You can focus on one chakra. You can focus on one area of the body. You can focus on something that you're dealing with that you have to release. You can go outside and scream into a pillow if you want to because you're so frustrated. There's so many things that you could do to release
The energy.
Pandora's box
Yeah.
of what's going on, to
Yeah.
be able to find that balance and allow you to take every step forward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what
One
I think
more.
is so important. Well, you got another one.
I got one more for you.
Oh, awesome.
One that I've started really recently, which is like so weird, but like humming, like
Yes.
like
Love that.
whatever. That is a really good one too. It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's good for your nervous system. So,
I'll share, because some people will laugh, those that know me, because you're going to giggle.
oh,
Dance like no one's watching. And so I will literally crank up the radio. I will sing at the top of my lungs, and I will literally dance like no one's watching.
no way.
My dog, I think, has reported me.
Absolutely. He's like, Mom, have you lost it? Like, who do I call? Mom? No, I'm just kidding. It's a good thing.
But you feel so much better afterwards,
Yeah.
especially if it's a song you quite enjoy.
Yeah.
Just have some fun and let it, like, just like when you're exercising too, right? Like releasing and letting go of all the tightness and stiffness in your body
Yeah.
is so important. But there's so many things you can do. Simona and I could
Oh,
go on forever.
we could go on forever. Life is just too short to be serious all the time.
I
You
love that.
got to find those little pockets of joy, those little moments of joy.
Yeah.
And if that moment of joy is like, my neighbor's kids sometimes will come and knock at my door. And if talking to them for 5 minutes is my little moment of joy, like I love it. Come on down,
Yes. Yeah. It's a simple life for them, isn't it?
So simple for them. So
Love
simple
it.
for them. So
What
simple.
would you say is, for a leader that's struggling and saying, I don't know how I can fit one more thing into my day? What would you
Mm,
say to them around how do you prioritize your own self-care to be able to lead themselves better, but their teams as well? What would you say?
totally. So I am very much that person I'm saying this from a place of
Okay,
experience because I am that person that's like, oh my God, I can't do one more thing. You can absolutely fit self-care in. You just need to want to. It's a
right.
mindset shift because if you have time to scroll on your phone at the end of the day, you have the time to do a 10-minute meditation. If you have the time to, watch TikTok for an hour and a half or watch a Netflix show or whatever, you have time to go for a walk. You know what I mean? Like it's these little things that they're choices that we make every single day. And
Right.
so it's about being aware of where am I putting my energy? Where am I putting my attention? And what is my intention of my day every single day? You know, it's a choice. It's a mindset shift. And so you might be so busy to doing all of the things but you can find time if you really want to. You just have to be aware and you just have to want to.
Exactly. And that's just it. And again, giving yourself grace if you don't make it one day.
Exactly.
All right. I think the part of that is what I've learned is giving yourself grace. I always say that we will give people so much permission, so much empathy, so much forgiveness around certain things, yet we are hardest on ourselves, which
Yeah.
is not part of this energetic self care that we talk about. And
No.
giving yourself grace has been something that a lot of people have taught me. And I've actually got a girlfriend who said to me, it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be something as simple as grabbing your favorite blanket when it's chilly or your wrap,
Yeah.
or putting those reading socks on, or having
Mm,
that cup of tea that you really enjoy. It can be something so simple to give yourself grace and say, it's okay. Like today, tomorrow's another day. It's okay.
exactly. I
So I
love
think
that.
that's key.
I love that.
I have one last question for you. So, what is the biggest thing you've learned throughout your journey that you can share with our listeners? It could be a valuable lesson, sorry, a transformative experience, a book that you read that really had an impact on your professional growth.
This is such a good question.
Put you
I
on the spot.
Oh, I try not to like think of these answers in advance because I like when they come naturally.
Yes.
I would say that the biggest thing that has been a game changer was realizing that I didn't have to do everything alone and that there are other people who can do things better than me and it's okay. That
Right.
was a huge like lesson that I learned, and I
Right.
didn't learn that until I started to develop self-awareness
Yes.
and understanding emotions in a different way. And so one tool that I really like is the emotion wheel. Have you Yes. Okay. I'll explain it
I
very
have it
quickly.
right
You
here
have it? Do you actually?
somewhere. I do. I printed it out recently to be able to focus on some emotions that people talk about. So
Mm,
yeah, I it's something that I always have close to me
I
when
love
somebody
that.
tells me, they're frustrated or they feel lost.
Yep.
Well, let's take a look at that emotional wheel
Yep.
and where do you land? Let's figure
Yep.
that out. So
That's
go ahead.
something no, 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 that's beautiful. It's something that I've just been practicing a lot of lately because you can be upset about something or angry about something, but what is that actually? Are you actually
Mhm,
disappointed? Are you actually
mhm.
frustrated? Are you actually sad? Okay, if you're sad, are you, feeling left out? Like it really allows you to like go deeper and explore what the emotion is behind the thing that you're feeling.
Yes.
For me, I'm someone who I just have to take the drama out of the story sometimes because I am such an emotional person that I add extra drama into things when there doesn't necessarily need to be that. And so by fact checking my emotions and being like, okay, this is actually how I feel and it's okay and it's just gonna pass and it is what it is, that is the best way, I think. I love
Okay.
that. I love that emotion wheel. Highly
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah. It's something that I have seen previously, but really pulled it out when I was taking my life coaching course.
Mm,
It was definitely something we focused on. And then I put it aside for a while. And probably in the last month, I'm like, no, I want to bring that forward because people have been talking a lot about there's just so much going on, so much, I feel pressure or stress right now. And I hate
mm,
using that word stress because everybody uses it so loosely, whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, whatever it is. And so that's why I wanted to pull it back out so that when I am speaking with somebody, we can dig in a little deeper to exactly just what you spoke about to understand where truly is that root cause so that we can work on what that is and where does it stem from.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
And how do
beautiful.
we how do we how do we work through it? Because you may not be able to solve for it, but
Mm,
there are ways that you can work through it so that it's not as hurtful a feeling as it is in the moment, right? So
right.
yeah,
Exactly.
I love that.
A lot of
Love that.
empathy, a lot of kindness. That's all. That's all that
Yes.
matters in life is you got to figure out what your core values are and you got to lead with that. But
Yes. It was funny. That was one of the questions around the communication piece was around, how do you tie the energetics and vision and together? And it's you answered it earlier on, but it's so true when you speak about energetics communication. It really does touch every element of your life. And I think for our listeners out there, if any of you have taken any form of human design, MBTI, Strength Finders, any of the assessments to learn about yourself, go back and revisit it every so
Yeah.
often, whether it's quarterly or twice a year or whatever it is, to truly understand, because your situation that you're in may change, but the core root of yourself, of how you think, how you operate, doesn't usually change unless you've had some big traumatic shift. But generally, you are going to work a particular way all your life. And it's fine tuning and looking for those ways to be able to support what it is you're doing or love to do in line with that, so that you are living a happier life,
I love that.
because happiness happens.
When you're least expecting it.
What
I have
else
to
would
say,
you like to share with, sorry, go ahead. What else would you like to share with our listeners?
one last final tip that I have for our listener today: be so mindful of how you spend your time. Be mindful of how many calls you have in your calendar, how many meetings you're taking every day, how much energy you're putting out for other people versus how you're replenishing that energy. For example, I'm someone in the past that I've, had no other choice but to pack my days with calls because there was just no other option. And then this week, because we're coming off like a holiday weekend and all that, I had no calls booked on Monday or Tuesday. I did everything client wise, all of my client work on Monday and Tuesday, when typically that would take me all week in between calls. So I've decided I'm not going to take calls on those days anymore. You know what I mean? I'm going to
Love that.
focus in, get the stuff you need to get done first.
Right.
And then, do your calls when it makes sense. So that's one thing I really have been like shifting into, is being so protective of my calendar. So key.
One of my previous managers, who I'm hoping I'll get on here on the podcast one time, because he's near and dear to my heart. He actually taught me about boundaries, because you're talking about boundaries and actually setting up time when you can do your work. Because I said, I struggle. I'm on all these, in the corporate world, on calls nonstop all day. And you could, but when are you going to get your work done? So now
Exactly.
you're talking evenings and weekends. Well, that's not always the case. There are ways that you can work around that. I do have a boundaries masterclass that's free online that people can watch, but it's talking a little bit about, do you have to take it? So if Simona and I are in a team, maybe we can alternate every other time. And so that frees up one of us for that time to be able to do something, complete something, figure something out, and work on something different and just get the updates, because you don't have to be on the calls all the time. That is not the intent. And so I started blocking time when I could actually get my work done. Then my team also saw that, so that they knew that I was working on something, and they could either come in and ask a question if they were working on that project with me, or they knew they could go into my calendar and book some time to be able
Love
to
that.
speak. But making sure that you really have control of that calendar is key to being able to have some form of life insanity after the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right?
I love that. That's
Setting
beautiful.
boundaries. Great. Anything else you'd like to share, Simona?
No.
I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast on Happiness Happens, especially since we're talking about energetics.
Yes, absolutely. So I host a podcast. I host two, but Happiness Happens is a self-growth podcast where we talk a lot about spirituality and understanding what happiness means to you. I have all kinds of amazing people on my podcast. We have conversations about everything from, spirituality to energy work to, trauma work, and like all of the things in between, life lessons. I love that podcast. I've had it since the beginning of 2019, and I love the conversations that are on there. And I am a podcast producer. That's my business. So if you are interested in starting your own podcast, or have ever decided you wanted to start a podcast, I have lots of free resources on my website, and you can just go to my website, simonacostantini.com/resources, and send me a message. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn. I am now on Thread. Have you heard of Thread?
I have not heard of Thread.
We can talk about that later. But all of the places. And yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to share all those. And like I said to everybody at the beginning of the call, 8 weeks to launching your podcast is a program that I signed up with for Simona. So thank you, because
You're
I'm here
welcome.
because of you.
Yay!
What a phenomenal program. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast for whatever that is, certainly feel free to reach out to Simona, talk to me. But
Yes.
her program is great. It is a step by step on how to get your podcast set up and launched. And it's been thoroughly enjoyable. And I'm excited to do more podcasts. So thank you.
That makes me so happy. That makes me so happy. Thank you. Yeah, that program launches twice a year. So the next time I'm going to launch it, like it'll open end of August for September. But if you want to get on the wait list for that in advance, I can definitely make sure that happens. So
Awesome. Thank you.
thank you.
And if you're looking for any tips and tricks to do anything on social media, feel free to watch Simona because it'll definitely be out there somewhere.
You're
And
so
I'll be
good.
sure to include all of Simona's contact information as part of this podcast so that we can make sure that you are able to reach out to her. And I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited. Is there any last tip that you'd like to leave with our listeners at all?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I've loved having this conversation with you and talking about this because I don't think we talk about it enough. And no massive thing to share with our listener before we leave, except for something that I say on my podcast all the time, which is happiness happens when you're least expecting it. And I feel like it truly does. And so be open to possibility, be open to change, be open to growth, be open to a different way, be open to something new because you might surprise yourself. You might actually end up a little bit happier than you thought.
Yes, absolutely. And there are two ladies on this call right here that are proof of exactly that. So,
Exactly.
well, thank you again, Simona. And thank you to my listeners. I'm so excited to have you here again today and look forward to having you join on our next podcast. Again, if there's any particular topic that you'd like to hear about, feel free to reach out to me. And in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. And remember, happiness does happen when you least expect it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of today's Balanced Leader. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion on wellness and leadership and that you took away some valuable insights and strategies to help you become a better leader in your own life. Please leave a rating and review. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one as we continue our exploration of what it means to live life as today's leader. In the meantime, take care of yourself and remember that true leadership starts with taking care of your own well-being. One deep breath in and one deep breath out. Keep striving for excellence and inspiring others to do the same. And finally, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Today's Balanced Leader.